What is going on, people? It's your boy Neo, back again for another long-winded discussion. But hey, you already knew that. So, what is the topic for tonight's video? Tonight. Ooh, we have got quite a doozy of a discussion on our hands, ladies and gentlemen. But let's not waste any more time than we already have. We're going to be late. The reunion is almost here. Join me as we talk about a legend for a new generation, the Final Fantasy VII Remake. I just got done playing this game about 2 hours or so back, and suffice it to say, your boy has got some impressions. He's got some thoughts and opinions he needs to share. But a little bit of housekeeping we got to get out of the way beforehand. I know a lot of folks are going to be wondering whether or not I'm going to be discussing spoilers as it pertains to the story in addition to the ending. As far as the ending is concerned, I'm not going to be discussing it one bit. I actually have a whole spoiler-filled discussion happening later on down the road. But when it comes to the story, I will be mentioning and discussing things as it pertains to moments from the original Final Fantasy VII that they have expanded upon. So while it isn't necessarily a spoiler in a sense, since they've expanded upon it, I just wanted to warn people that I'm going to be mentioning it if you are playing the game right now. That being said, outside of that, we're just going to be talking about the game, my experiences with it, the gameplay, battle system, things like that. So, we might as well address the elephant in the room, folks wondering as to why I didn't do a first impressions video on this, considering it's kind of been the norm for me when it comes to playing a lot of JRPGs, especially JRPGs where individuals are on the fence about it. And this one right here, I mean, for a game that's as iconic as Final Fantasy VII, there's still a lot of folks wondering whether or not this game is worth it. Is it worth picking up? And there's a multitude of reasons behind that. I'm not going to go through the entire history as to why people feel the way they do about the idea of Final Fantasy VII being split up into multiple parts. But I will say this, though. The entirety of this game's existence, justifying it even being a thing, is predicated on how well Square Enix is able to make this shit work. That's essentially it. So starting with this game right here up until whenever they finish this, however many parts, that is going to be the indication on whether or not it was worthy of splitting it up into multiple parts. So the things that I'm going to be talking about here, and the reason as to why I didn't do a first impressions video, is because I knew playing through the game, 10 hours in, depending on what happens at the end of the game, is going to affect my opinion on how it affects my overall opinion of whatever this journey is, if that makes any sense whatsoever. So I just wanted to power through everything, play through the entire game. So let's talk about the length of it, because that's a major point of contention for a lot of people. They're wondering, yeah, okay, they're splitting up this game. It was just so funny, because the dialogue of splitting up Final Fantasy VII in multiple parts has always been weird, because a lot of people are just like, okay, Final Fantasy VII is so big and massive, I don't want them to split up the game, but if they are going to split up the game, I want it to be as big and massive as the original game, but the original game is like 40 hours long when you think about it, so it's like, what do people want, you know what I'm saying? When they said that the length of the game is going to be around the length of a standard Final Fantasy game, they weren't lying. It took me about 40 hours of playing through the game, and that was doing basically 98% of all the side missions that are in their game. There aren't really a lot of them, but after doing all those things, in addition to just, messing around here and there, it took me about 40 hours. Could I have got done with it around like 35? Yeah, but as it stands, in terms of the length of the game, I am actually happy about it. I'm glad, because that's the standard length of a Final Fantasy game, give or take a few hours in either opposite direction. You know what I'm saying? So no complaints about the length of it. Now, when it comes to the actual handling of the story, this is also a major highlight I have for the game. Because I actually replayed the first opening section of Final Fantasy VII, which is so funny. When you talk about the first opening section of Final Fantasy VII, now it means like the first hour of the game when you do the first mission. But back then, the first opening section was probably like the first 10 hours. You know what I'm saying? And the first 10 hours of Final Fantasy VII, the original, is more than what they put into the remake of the game. The remake of the game is really only the first 5-6 hours of the original Final Fantasy VII. So it's so weird. But back on point, I was skeptical, like, how in the world are they going to remake just the first 5 hours of Final Fantasy VII, and they're going to be stretching that out like 7 times that length? That makes no sense whatsoever. But they somehow found a way to strike a balance, because what they're essentially doing is they are going back and they are expanding upon the story, and they're giving more backstory to things that happen in the world. So everything that's happening with Shinra, Avalanche, things that are happening to characters related to Shinra and Avalanche, you're getting a lot more backstory. Things in the original that, you know, back then we didn't really view it as rushed, but when we view it into like the when you know, hindsight's always 20/20, as they say, but when you view things under a different microscope later on, you're just like, oh, I would have loved for them to expand upon that, but it was the norm for JRPGs back then. They didn't focus on all the characters, they just focused on some of the characters. So now that they had this opportunity to go back and give more clarification to things, that's what they did. And with this game, okay, I'll say this much. It works, but at the same time, it doesn't. Like, there are moments where you really do appreciate all of the extra backstory that you're giving, but there are some situations where it's just literally cutscenes for the sake of cutscenes. Like, we didn't need that much exposition going on. It's like, we know what's happening. Just because somebody says the color is blue, that doesn't mean you need to spend 15 minutes explaining why the color is blue. That's it. We get it. Like, there are just some things that are taken at face value. That's all you need. So it's a double-edged sword in this scenario. Like, sometimes all that stuff works and sometimes it doesn't in terms of the story. But it works out more often than not by comparison to what the alternative would have been, which is just literally you sitting there like, oh my God, this is just like, why are you even doing this? So as far as that is concerned, with them stretching out the story, I do like it because it's making me feel for the characters a lot more, and especially earlier on than it did in the original game. Because if you played the original Final Fantasy VII, oh, spoilers for a 30-year-old game, it didn't really start getting good until you get into the second disc. That's when things start getting really interesting with the characters. In this game, they actually give life to some of the main characters right here. They have more personality attached to them. Barrett, Aerith, like, those are some of the standouts in my personal opinion, in addition to how the story relates to Cloud and who he is, his character, as he relates to some of the other things we'll touch on later. So they do a good job as far as that is concerned. Like I said, it's not perfect. It doesn't work out as well as it should all the time. And again, it does go back to how this is going to be judged when you're looking at it after everything is on the table. Like, you have the entire universe as a whole. Will them spending all this excess time dragging stuff out, will it justify when we get to the end of the experience? I just need to just drill that into y'all's brains. You know, that's basically what everything is predicated on. All right. So as it pertains to the story in the game, I really did enjoy it. In terms of presentation with the story, the voice acting was really good. I mean, there are a couple of moments where it is kind of rough and, I don't want to say wooden. I think maybe it was a lack of direction and maybe the scripting wasn't as great. Tifa, for example, when you first meet her in the game, she comes off as very stiff. But later on, as things progress, she comes into her own and it's nice. But as a whole, I think for certain characters, it works out great. For others, not so much. And that is something that really, it bothers me. But at the same time, it doesn't, considering, like I said, with JRPGs, this is kind of par for the course. And unfortunately, you know, not everything could be as good as Persona. Like, the reason why I put Persona 5 on such a high pedestal is because the way those characters talk is the way, like, actual people talk. Like, just actual dialogue, and the direction that the director is giving the actors works out very well. Whereas you look at some of the stuff in this game, when it's great, oh, it works out fantastic. And then like a lot of the other times, it's like, nobody talks like that. You know what I'm saying? It's like nobody has conversations like that, you know? But again, like I mentioned with the expansion of the story, is it enough to make or break my opinion on the game? No, it's not, because it's a heck of a lot better than some of the other recent Square Enix examples like Kingdom Hearts 3 and Final Fantasy 15 and things like that. So presentation-wise, the game is incredible. Like, the graphics, out of this freaking world. Like, I don't know how, like, what they've done, but like, the more you play the game and the further along you get into the game, it's like the graphics get better. I think it probably has to do with the scenery and the situation that you get involved in, but holy freaking crap, these are some of the best graphics that I think I've seen all generation. Now, I have to qualify that statement, because while the graphics are indeed beautiful and pretty and it's awesome, it's not universal across the board. When you're in the first couple of sections in the towns, some of the textures are very low res. I'm talking PlayStation 1 territory. It looks really bad, especially some of the side characters that you come across. even they look kind of janky in situations. So while the character models like for Cloud and Tifa and Barret and all those guys look great, and the cutscenes are great, and just like the seamlessness between going into a cutscene into gameplay is awesome. It's all the other stuff when you're doing like side missions that just look really rough around the edges. Now, I have heard from some people, I cannot confirm this to be true, but apparently this was supposed to be fixed with the day one patch, like textures loading late, things like that. But due to the situations happening in the world, they didn't have the time to. So I'm not really going to harp on them too much, and especially considering, like I said, it's not enough to make or break the experience. You know, if I was going to sit here and scrutinize everything that happens in this game from this down to the third, and then sit back and say, oh, I still really love the game, is that really fair? You know? And like I said, we have other examples of Square Enix games where it doesn't look that good. Final Fantasy 15 did not look as good as often as this game looks good. And it did not run as well as this game runs. So again, like I said, we're moving on upwards. Like they set the bar so low with that one, but now we're up here. But yeah, so presentation wise, I really have no complaints with it whatsoever. It's such a gorgeous game, and I really am ecstatic as a fan of the brand and as a fan of FF7 that so much love and attention was made into realizing this vast world and this just complex array of characters. It was awesome to see all that stuff. Okay, so now that I've touched on things related to the story and the presentation as it pertains to the story, I want to move into some of the gameplay aspects as it pertains to them expanding upon it for a new generation. So you know how I mentioned how they're going to be expanding upon things in the story for the sake of the fact that they have this time? They did the same thing with the gameplay, and by that I mean they've expanded upon it by adding in just like more depth to the world and more opportunities for you to interact with the world and side characters and things like that. So on paper, when you first get into the world, you see that, oh my god, there's a bunch of like NPCs and they're talking and they're reacting to everything that's happening in the world. Like, whoa, it's great. It's good like the first time, and then the second time, and by the third time they're just recycling all the dialogue over and over again. So it's not really like it's in a world that's alive. It's not like a GTA, it's not like Witcher, it's not like any of those games where the world is just constantly reacting to everything that happens in your life. But that's okay, because those are the pinnacle of the genre, and while it would be great for them to do that, remember, it's not the main focal point. Your main focal point is not to live in the world of Midgar and the slums. Like we all know, there's a story that has to be adhered to first. So since we're talking about the game and the story, let's talk about the side missions that they included in it. The side missions, I don't know where in the world y'all are getting this statement from saying that the side missions would have the exact same content as the main missions. I don't understand that at all, because out of all the side missions that I've played, probably like 3 or 4 of them actually have enough content worthy of, excuse me, my freaking mustache is starting to itch. I gotta shave it soon. It has enough content to justify it actually existing, because 95% of the side missions in this game are just dumb fetch quests, or they're just go slay these monsters here. And it sucks, because with the game design, like, so there's something up with the waypoints and the objectives markers in the game. Like, I'm okay if something is like an area objective, like let's say for example, oh, find the 5 kids here, you know, and if you look on your mini map, it will have like the location of where it is, but that location is not where the kids are. That's just a location of where they potentially could be. Whereas in other open world games, they have an area effect going on where it's like, oh, it's all over here and stuff like that. They'll tell you there it is, not just have some arbitrary marker right there, and they do that. So for me, it was just kind of weird from a game design philosophy. So there are many times I was just running around trying to find certain things, and I was like, okay, this isn't really going anywhere. But like I said, that's just par for the course when it comes to side missions. Like, not everybody can be as good as CD Projekt Gods when it comes to The Witcher 3 and their stories. Like the side missions in this game, the really good ones usually involve you fighting an awesome boss. Awesome boss. Awesome boss. You fighting a really awesome boss, or something that relates to giving development for some characters that they didn't do in the original Final Fantasy VII. So there's a character, for example, that, correct me if I'm wrong, he wasn't in the original Final Fantasy VII, but he was in one of the supplemental materials. I'm not sure if it was a novel or some type of a manga or comic. I do remember seeing his design somewhere. But he's somebody who you come encounter with throughout the main story, and he has a mission that's actually pretty heartfelt. It's awesome, it's great, and I enjoy doing that. But that is like 1 out of every 8 side missions. Like, none of those missions could ever be as good. So as a whole, the side missions to me are just pretty much busy work for you to go and get gil, items, materia, things like that. They aren't really anything that you're going to write home about saying, wow, I really enjoyed the time that I was spending in these side missions. So if I'm being realistic, I could probably shave off 5 hours from the game time if I didn't do any of the side missions. But I did do all the side missions. Why? Because I wanted to see if they were actually worth a damn, and unfortunately the vast majority were not. Unfortunately. Oh man. Oh, but speaking of things that kind of like bothered people, talking about like the linearity of the game. Apparently the game is too linear compared to the original Final Fantasy VII. You see, that right there is how you know who's played Final Fantasy VII and who hasn't played Final Fantasy VII, and they're just looking for talking points to complain on the internet. The first part of Final Fantasy VII, when you're going through Midgar, is a largely linear experience. Why would it be any different for the remake to do that? In fact, the remake actually expands upon it, and it makes it so you have other things to do. So you can go around and explore and do certain things, and it adds like longevity to it. So why people are complaining about it being linear when the first part of Final Fantasy VII was linear, like, I don't know what people expected. But again, that's besides the point. But yeah, when you're talking about the structure of the linearity as it pertains to a chapter, it pretty much has its own rhythm to it. So you'll do like some main story stuff, then there'll be a chapter where you're doing open world, which is essentially your chance to do like the side missions and stuff. Then you do a couple of story stuff, open world, side missions and stuff, and it gets into a rhythm, and it does that a couple of times throughout the course of the game. That being said, while I did appreciate the fact that it gave you some type of freedom, it does come with a bit of padding attached to it. There are a couple of main missions in there that you can just obviously tell they're doing this to fill time. Like, that's literally what it is. There'll be a couple of objectives you're doing, and you're just sitting there like, this wasn't in the original Final Fantasy VII. They're just doing this for the sake of adding in some type of gameplay mechanic. That's it. That's all they're doing. But again, it goes back to the grander scheme of things when you're looking back on it. Is all of this busy work stuff, hitting switches and levers and using cranes, is that stuff going to be worth it? We will find out in the end. Okay. So, let's move into the combat system of the game, which is something I was very much so looking forward to after playing the demo. Which is so funny because before the demo, I was kind of like, yo, what the F is this combat system? Because that original PlayStation Experience demo gameplay that they showed off like 5 years ago, ooh, that was looking kind of rough. That was not it, Chief. But I understand. That was a very early build of the game. They didn't really know what they were doing with that game. It definitely looked a lot more Kingdom Hearts in that respect. But now, this game, its battle system, it's got its own identity. And again, it goes back to what I was saying. You can tell who is looking to complain online and who has actually played the game. Because anybody who was saying that this battle system is just like Kingdom Hearts, have y'all played a Kingdom Hearts game? There's no way. Kingdom Hearts is a lot more free flow, action paced. I don't want to say butt mashy, but it is kind of butt mashy by comparison to this. When you're playing the Final Fantasy VII Remake, you cannot run through this shit for the most part button mashing. Because if you do that for some bosses, it's either going to take you 16 hours to defeat a 5-minute boss, or you're just going to get creamed. Because the game promotes you filling up your filling up the ATB bar. It promotes filling that up, using some type of spells or abilities, things like that, and switching between the multiple characters. That's the point of the game, and it really shines. Playing through this battle system, I was just having so much freaking fun. The only thing I wish they would improve on would be the guard mechanic. To me personally, I don't think it's as responsive as it should be. But that being said, that's a very minor flaw in the intricacies of the battle system. The battle system is freaking great, man. I'm having a blast with it. I've said that it should have been what Final Fantasy 15 was supposed to be, but at the same time, what Final Fantasy 15 was supposed to be, which is essentially a realistic version of Kingdom Hearts, I think it did okay in that version. Should it have been a mainline Final Fantasy system for the battling? No. This right here is what I imagine a modern interpretation of a turn-based battle system to be, because it ticks all the boxes. You have your regular attacks, you wait until you can build up something, and then you do your special attack, and you have the potential to stagger an enemy and go from there. It's a lot of fun. It's gotten comparisons to Final Fantasy 13, which is kind of obvious considering I believe the director of that game was one of the co-directors for this one. But it makes sense considering that was the last mainline Final Fantasy game that a lot of people were working on that wasn't 15. So if they incorporate some of those elements, I don't see it as a problem. You want to know the reason why? Because this battle system gets fun in the first like 2 hours, as opposed to 13, where it took 33 hours to open up. You see the difference? And back then it was still turn-based too. So there's a major difference when people say, and they strawman that, oh, y'all hated 13 and you like this one. No, it's because this battle system gets fun in 3 hours as opposed to 33. Oh, y'all hated it. Like, come on. Again, you could tell who was playing the game and who's played it. And then people were just saying things because they heard someone on the internet complain about it and they just want to parrot the talking points. I don't get it. Well, actually, I do get it, but you know. So yeah, the battle system is a lot of fun. My personal favorite character to play as throughout the course of it was Tifa, because she's just a fucking beast. Like, oh my god, Tifa is so overpowered in this game. I love it. And I was so happy to see that the materia system is intact and you can do so much crazy stuff with it. So much to the point where I actually want to go back and replay the game and just like have all different builds and do certain things with characters, because it promotes playing like that. It promotes you having the flexibility and the freedom. So you could play the game as Cloud for the most part, and then you have all your other characters do their things, which is fine. But the fun is actually playing as Cloud and Tifa and Aerith and Barret. Like, there are many opportunities where I would just play as Barret, and I could either play him as an offensive character, where I have him on the forefront because he has like one particular weapon that he gets, where it's kind of like a it's like, you know, it's not like a wrecking ball, but it's like a mace. You know, you have a mace, right? It's like his weapon right there. So instead of using guns, which is like a ranged type, you can have him on the forefront. So I made him my tank. I gave him all types of crazy HP and attack power. And then I would have my other characters buff him off, debuff enemies and stuff. And I would play it like I was playing an MMO, things like that. Or I could have him in the back where he's just providing support. And if I wanted to play him as a healer, which, you know, it's not like the best way, but you can do it. You can do that. And I just had a lot of fun mixing and matching all the characters. So the combat system is freaking awesome. I love it. That being said, while I love the combat system, with the exception of end game bosses, like when you get towards the final chapters and a couple of enemies here and there, the game is way too easy. It's way too easy. And I can't even say it's because I level grinded, because I didn't. All I did was the side missions. The level that I was at by the end of the game is basically what you're supposed to be at, give or take 1 or 2 levels. I don't know. So playing through it, I just wish that there was a lot more of a challenge, because the things that I talked about, I got excited for, where I was having different characters and they were using their buffs and their debuffs, things like that, which is what you do in a normal RPG. I really couldn't utilize that until the end of the game, considering, first off, you don't always have all the characters with you at one point, you know, because very early RPG things, I told you, very early stuff. You don't have them all at once, and when you do have those characters, you can only utilize them to their fullest capacity when you're fighting those big bosses or the stronger enemies that you get towards the end of the game. So the game, in my personal opinion, was just way too easy. I know when you beat the game, it unlocks hard mode difficulty where you can't use items and you can only heal at rest points. That's fine. That's cool. But why do I have to go through the entire experience again just to get more of a challenge? Like, you get what I'm saying? I feel like the difficulty should be scaled appropriately. And if you think it's too easy, why not just include at least a hard mode off the bat and you don't have to wait? I can understand unlocking like critical mode or something later on when you beat it, but, you know, but again, like I said, it's not a deal breaker when it comes to my overall enjoyment of the game. Whew, how long have we been recording this video for? Damn near 25 minutes. 25 minutes. All right. Okay, we're going to power through a couple of things. And like I said, I'm just going based off of memory right here. So I'm just thinking back to all the things I wanted to touch on. So I touched on the story. I touched on the padding, the good and the bad of that. Touched on the gameplay. Touched on the linear versus open world thing. Was there any other things that I really wanted to discuss? I did presentation. I did things like that. No, I think all the major stuff has to do with the ending. Yeah. Yeah, it's got to do with the ending. But again, I'm going to give myself like 30 seconds to think of something because I know the second I cut this video off, I'm just going to be like, oh man, I forgot to talk about that. So give me some time here, people. I'm doing this shit raw. What can I say? I do a lot of things in life raw. Okay. Totally professional, I know. No, I think that was it. I genuinely think that was it. Yeah, so we might as well just wrap this up right here, y'all. Overall, my impressions of the Final Fantasy VII Remake, it was a hell of a fun time. I had a lot of fun playing this game. It is one of the better titles that Square Enix has put out in recent memory. There is some give and take to it. Like I said, a lot of this in its whole existence is predicated on how well they're able to stick the landing at the end of all of this when this journey is complete. Because like I said, there are a couple of things here that padding for the sake of padding, I was not a fan of. Even though there are some of those like expanded story sections that do give backstory to some of these characters that I enjoyed, I don't think that that's enough to really justify them like spending so much time to get to that point, if you get what I'm saying. The music, Neo, you sly dog, you forgot about the most important aspect of the game. The music of the Final Fantasy VII Remake, oh my god, I just want to slap myself in the face for waiting until I'm 30 minutes in to talk about this. You know how people say there are certain things in life that can really make you emotional? The music of this game, like, it'd be one thing if they just reorchestrated the classic themes, like, because we've heard that before. Like, whenever they came out with a newer Final Fantasy game, they do that. Advent Children, they do that. Kingdom Hearts, they do that. But the music that you hear in this, not only did they provide new versions of it, there are remixes where there's just like new subtleties and styles and flares, and at the same time, it's still honoring the legacy of Final Fantasy and this incredible score crafted by Nobuo Uematsu. It is just like, wow. And again, it goes back to who worked on the music of this game. The people that did Final Fantasy 13, which Final Fantasy 13, like it or hate it, unanimously had some of the best music in the entire series. Like that right there, that shit slapped. And they worked that magic for this game right here. It's literally just, it's beautiful. It's freaking beautiful, man. I loved it. So yeah, I think I pretty much said all I needed to say as far as the remake is concerned, almost 30 minutes in. Now we are going to get into the really fun part where we discuss the spoilers regarding the story. So stay tuned for that one, ladies and gentlemen. We'll be following this one. For me, for now, my name is NGS signing out. Like always, I will catch you guys later. Peace.